The final turn of the wrench echoed a satisfying click, a small victory in the quiet suburban afternoon. Alex wiped a bead of sweat from their brow, stepping back to admire the newly installed rain barrel. Its sleek, dark green form sat snugly. Beside the garage, a beacon of eco-conscious living in a sea of manicured lawns. For Alex, it wasn't just about collecting water, it was about principle, about reducing waste, about making a small, tangible difference in a world that often felt overwhelming. The afternoon sun caught its smooth surface, promising gallons of precious free water for the thirsty hydrangeas and the burgeoning vegetable patch, a perfect addition to their home, a quiet statement of self-sufficiency. Or so Alex thought. A shadow fell, long and precise, cutting across the neatly trimmed grass. It wasn't from a cloud. It belonged to a figure standing rigidly at the very edge of Alex's property line, back ramrod straight, a disapproving aura radiating from her like heat from asphalt. Her hair was a helmet of blonde perfection, her floral blouse pristine, and her eyes, even from this distance, held the piercing intensity of a hawk spotting its prey. "Is that a rain barrel?" The voice, when it came, was not a question but an accusation, sharp as a freshly sharpened pencil dissecting the peaceful air. It was the voice of Karen, the self-appointed guardian of neighborhood aesthetics, and Alex knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that their quiet battle for sustainability had just declared war. The initial skirmish over the rain barrel was just the opening shot, a chilling prelude to the full-blown siege that was about to descend upon Alex's quiet life. Karen, it quickly became clear, wasn't content with merely issuing a warning. The very next morning, a new, crisper notice appeared taped to Alex's front door. This one, unlike the last, was far more detailed, citing not just the unapproved exterior alteration of the rain barrel, but also non-compliant shrub height, unauthorized garden gnomes. Alex owned a single, discreet ceramic squirrel, and a vaguely worded accusation of general aesthetic disharmony. Alex stared at the paper, a cold knot tightening in their stomach. The squirrel had been a housewarming gift. The shrubs were precisely at the height stipulated in the HOA's own landscaping guidelines, which Alex had painstakingly reviewed. This wasn't about rules. It was about harassment. It was about Karen. The complaints escalated with unsettling speed. Every week brought a new, absurd grievance. A stray leaf on the driveway, a recycling bin left out an hour too long, the audacity of a slightly too bright welcome mat. Each notice was signed with the imperious flourish of K. Holloway, HOA Board. Member. A signature that began to haunt Alex's waking hours. Karen seemed to have appointed herself Alex's personal aesthetics auditor, her perfectly coiffed head a constant, watchful presence from across the street. Alex even caught her once, openly pointing and whispering to another neighbor while Alex was merely watering their prize-winning petunias. Alex tried to play by the book. They painstakingly measured their shrubs, moved the offending squirrel to a less visible corner, and even bought a more subdued welcome mat. They spent hours combing through the vast, convoluted HOA bylaws, determined to find a clause, a loophole, anything that could justify the rain barrel, or, failing that, expose Karen's hypocrisy. What they found, however, was a maze of contradictory clauses and vague definitions that seemed designed less to maintain community standards and more to grant the HOA board, or rather Karen, absolute, unquestionable power. Frustration simmered, threatening to boil over. Alex attended the next HOA board meeting, clutching a stack of highlighted bylaws and photographic evidence of their compliance. The meeting hall was sparse, populated mostly by a handful of elderly residents who seemed too tired to care, and the three-person HOA board, a meek-looking secretary, a perpetually distracted treasurer, and Karen, radiating an almost visible aura of self-importance from the head of the table. When Alex's turn came, they spoke calmly, rationally, presenting their case for the rain barrel's environmental benefits, their compliance with existing rules, and the subjective nature of Karen's complaints. Karen listened, her face a mask of polite indifference, occasionally nodding with exaggerated patience. But when Alex finished, she merely offered a condescending smile. "Mr. Ms. Alex's last name," Karen began, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "We appreciate your passion for sustainability. However, the HOA has standards, aesthetics. Your rain barrel, while perhaps eco-friendly, is, in a word, ugly. It detracts from the uniform elegance we strive for. And as for your other concerns, our board operates with the highest integrity." She then seamlessly transitioned to a mundane discussion about gutter cleaning, effectively shutting down any further debate. Alex left the meeting feeling defeated, a pawn in Karen's private game of suburban dominion. Driving home, a different kind of anger began to brew, colder and more potent than simple frustration. This wasn't just about the rain barrel anymore. It was about arbitrary power, about intimidation, about the chilling realization that one person's subjective opinion could dictate the lives of an entire community. Over the next few days, Alex couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time they stepped outside, they felt Karen's gaze, a palpable weight pressing down on them. It pushed Alex to do something they rarely did: talk to their neighbors. They started with Mrs. Henderson, a sweet elderly woman who lived next door, known for her pristine rose garden. "Oh dear," Mrs. Henderson sighed, adjusting her glasses when Alex cautiously brought up the HOA. "Karen Holloway. She's particular. Used to complain about my bird feeder, said it attracted unwanted pests. I just took it down. Easier that way." There was a deep sadness in her eyes, a quiet resignation that spoke volumes. Then there was Michael, a young father down the street who worked from home. He chuckled darkly when Alex mentioned the aesthetic disharmony notice. "Dude, tell me about it. My kid left a chalk drawing on the driveway for like half an hour. Got a notice, said it was graffiti. This HOA is run like a petty kingdom. Karen's been on the board forever, pretty much runs the show." Michael's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Heard she got her cousin's landscaping company a no-bid contract last year. They're terrible, but no one says anything." A new emotion, stronger than frustration, began to mix with Alex's anger. Suspicion. These weren't isolated incidents. There was a pattern. The arbitrary rules, the lack of transparency, the intimidation. The stories of Karen's petty tyranny accumulated like discarded plastic bottles in a neglected storm drain. Mrs. Henderson's quiet submission, Michael's resigned cynicism. It painted a picture of a community held captive by a single, overbearing individual. The rain barrel, once a point of contention, now felt like a symbol, a battle line drawn in the sand. It wasn't just about collecting water anymore. It was about reclaiming a sense of autonomy, not just for Alex, but for everyone living under Karen's iron fist. The seeds of doubt had been planted, fertilized by frustration and watered by injustice. Alex started to realize that fighting Karen on the rain barrel was a losing game. The real fight lay deeper, at the very foundations of the HOA itself. The thought of challenging an entire organization, especially one seemingly run by a single, vindictive woman, was daunting. But the alternative, a life lived under constant petty scrutiny, was becoming unbearable. Alex opened their laptop, not to review the HOA bylaws again, but to search for something else entirely. HOA legal complaints. HOA abuse of power. How to decertify an HOA. The idea, once a fleeting, impossible fantasy, was now taking root. The innocent rain barrel sitting quietly outside had become the unlikely catalyst for a revolution. The sting of defeat from the HOA meeting, the dismissive wave of Karen's hand, lingered like an acrid taste in Alex's mouth. But beneath the bitter residue, a new, more potent resolve began to solidify. The scattered seeds of doubt planted by Mrs. Henderson and Michael had blossomed into an undeniable conviction that something was profoundly wrong, something far beyond an ugly rain barrel, or an unauthorized ceramic squirrel, something that demanded a deeper, more rigorous examination, not of Alex's yard, but of the very foundation upon which Karen's little kingdom stood. Alex no longer saw Karen as merely an annoying busybody. She was a symptom, a visible manifestation of a deeper malaise within the HOA, and now, fueled by a simmering blend of frustration and a newfound sense of civic duty, Alex's pursuit of knowledge shifted from simple compliance to forensic investigation. The evenings that once saw Alex unwinding with a book or tending to their garden now became a relentless, almost obsessive dive into the labyrinthine world of Homeowner Association regulations, state statutes, and the darker corners of online forums dedicated to HOA horror stories. Starting with the HOA's own publicly available documents, Alex requested every scrap of paper they were legally entitled to, the full, unredacted bylaws, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, CC&Rs, past meeting minutes, financial statements from the last 5 years, budgets, audit reports, and every single vendor contract that had been signed in recent memory. The initial response from the HOA office, predictably, was sluggish at best, outright obstructionist at worst. Phone calls went unanswered, emails were met with automated replies or vague promises, and when the documents finally arrived, they came in a series of piecemeal, heavily redacted batches, a clear attempt to overwhelm and discourage. But Alex, now fully committed, refused to be deterred. Armed with highlighters, sticky notes, and a growing stack of state HOA guidelines downloaded from government websites, they began the arduous task of cross-referencing, comparing, and analyzing, often late into the night, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating the determined furrow in their brow. The first red flags were subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye. A line item in a budget report for miscellaneous repairs that seemed unusually high and consistent year after year, with no corresponding detailed invoices. A recurring vendor name, Green Thumb Landscaping LLC, appearing on multiple contracts, for services ranging from lawn care to snow removal, always at premium rates. A series of minutes from board meetings that were conspicuously brief, lacking detailed discussions about major expenditures or dissenting opinions, painting a picture of unanimous, unquestioning agreement. These small inconsistencies, like faint whispers in the background, gradually grew louder as Alex delved deeper. The more Alex uncovered, the clearer the picture became. The HOA was not merely disorganized, it was actively opaque, seemingly designed to obscure rather than reveal. The financial statements, when finally coaxed out of the treasurer, were a masterclass in obfuscation, filled with vague categories and round numbers that offered little transparency. There were no detailed receipts for significant purchases, no competitive bids for major projects, and a suspiciously large reserve fund that rarely seemed to be tapped for its intended purpose, even as communal amenities like the park benches remained splintered and the clubhouse roof leaked during every heavy rain. The Green Thumb Landscaping invoices in particular began to stand out like a sore thumb. Alex remembered Michael's offhand comment about Karen's cousin, and a quick search on public business registries confirmed it. Green Thumb Landscaping LLC was indeed owned by a certain Ronald Holloway, listed at an address suspiciously close to Karen's own. This wasn't just mismanagement, this was a glaring conflict of interest, a direct violation of almost every HOA's fiduciary duty, a clear case of self-dealing, where Karen, as a board member, was directly benefiting from contracts, awarded by the very entity she was supposed to be overseeing impartially. Beyond the financial improprieties, Alex also meticulously documented instances of arbitrary rule enforcement. They found records of other residents who had faced disproportionately harsh fines for minor infractions, while others, seemingly favored by Karen, were allowed to let their properties fall into disrepair without consequence. There was a case of a young couple who had been fined thousands for painting their front door a slightly different shade of blue, while just 2 blocks away, A known board sympathizer had installed a garish, unapproved fountain that had never once garnered a violation notice. The patterns were undeniable. The HOA, under Karen's de facto leadership, was operating not as a democratically elected body serving its community, but as a personal fiefdom, selectively enforcing rules to punish those who dared to question authority and reward those who remained silent. As the mountain of evidence grew, so too did Alex's understanding of the legal landscape. They stumbled upon an invaluable resource, an online forum dedicated to helping homeowners fight abusive HOAs, moderated by a retired community association lawyer named Arthur Finch. Alex cautiously posted their initial findings, omitting identifying details, and received a remarkably swift and detailed response from Arthur. His advice was gold. He explained the specific state laws governing HOAs, detailed what constituted a breach of fiduciary duty, and outlined the precise legal steps required to initiate a process of HOA decertification, a monumental task, but not an impossible one, especially with compelling evidence of fraud and mismanagement. Arthur became an unofficial mentor, guiding Alex through the bureaucratic labyrinth, advising on how to formally request specific documents, how to interpret legal jargon, and how to build an undeniable case. He stressed the importance of meticulous documentation, of maintaining an ironclad paper trail, and of remaining calm and methodical in the face of inevitable pushback. With Arthur's guidance, Alex refined their investigation, creating elaborate spreadsheets to track discrepancies, meticulously dating and archiving every email, letter, and document, taking time-stamped photographs of neglected common areas and comparing them to paid maintenance invoices. The rain barrel, a small and singular grievance, had opened a Pandora's box of systemic corruption, and Alex realized that their fight was no longer just for personal peace, but for the financial well-being and basic rights of every homeowner in the community. The sheer volume of evidence, once overwhelming, now felt like a potent weapon. There was the clear overpayment for tree trimming services that had never been performed on specific trees. Invoices from Sunshine Cleaning Services for clubhouse cleaning that appeared quarterly, despite the clubhouse having been closed for renovations for 6 months, and a peculiar series of expenses labeled Board Discretionary Fund that seemed to correlate precisely with Karen's luxury vacation photos posted on social media. Each discovery was a painful confirmation of their suspicions, a stark testament to the brazenness of the abuse. The aha moment wasn't a single flash of insight, but a slow, dawning realization that solidified into an unshakable certainty. It came while comparing a particularly vague budget summary with a detailed state regulation on HOA reserve funds. The HOA's stated reserves were significantly lower than legally required, despite the huge annual fees charged to homeowners and the inflated miscellaneous expenses. The money wasn't just being mismanaged, it was being diverted, or simply wasn't there. This wasn't petty squabbling over aesthetics. This was systemic financial malfeasance, a betrayal of trust that affected every single property value in the community. It was the definitive proof, the smoking gun that transformed Alex from a frustrated homeowner into a reluctant crusader. The weight of this truth was immense, a heavy mantle of responsibility, but it also brought with it a profound sense of vindication. The rain barrel, once the source of so much petty annoyance, now stood as a silent monument to the injustice Alex had uncovered. It was no longer about a single, ugly object. It was about exposing the rot beneath the surface, about fighting for the principle of fairness and transparency, and about liberating their community from the tyranny of an HOA Karen who had forgotten her duty to serve and instead chose to rule. Alex knew with absolute certainty that the quiet battle was about to become a very public war, and they were armed with undeniable truth. The weight of the meticulously assembled binders, heavy with the damning truth, felt both like a crushing burden and an exhilarating shield as Alex finally stepped into the hushed, wood-paneled office of Elias Thorne, a lawyer renowned in state legal circles for his tenacious work in community association disputes, recommended to Alex by Arthur Finch, who had quietly advised that Thorne was the kind of legal pit bull who didn't back down from a fight, especially against entrenched power structures. Alex laid the evidence across the polished desk, the spreadsheets tracing the suspicious financial outflows, the scanned copies of inflated invoices from Green Thumb Landscaping LLC, alongside proof of Ronald Holloway's familial ties to Karen, the damning inconsistencies in the HOA's stated reserve funds versus legal requirements, the documented instances of selective rule enforcement, and a timeline of Karen's incessant petty harassment. Elias Thorne, a man with shrewd, intelligent eyes that seemed to take in every detail, listened patiently, his initial professional detachment slowly melting into a quiet, almost grim fascination, as Alex recounted the saga, punctuated by references to specific documents. He flipped through the binders, pausing at key exhibits, his brow furrowing deeper with each passing page. When Alex finished, a silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the air conditioning. Thorne leaned back, a thoughtful expression on his face. "This," he finally said, his voice measured, "is not a simple cease and desist. This is systemic. This is a very strong case for decertification, perhaps even for fraud charges, depending on what a deeper forensic audit reveals." He then proceeded to paint a stark, unvarnished picture of the legal gauntlet ahead. The process would be long, costly, emotionally draining, and Karen and the HOA, armed with their own legal counsel funded by community dues, would fight with every weapon at their disposal, attempting to discredit Alex, bury them in legal paperwork, and turn the community against them. Thorne warned of the personal toll, the public scrutiny, the possibility of retaliatory fines, and even countersuits. Yet, as he spoke, Alex felt not fear, but a hardening resolve. This was no longer just about the rain barrel, or even about exposing Karen. This was about justice, about reclaiming their community, and the path, however arduous, now seemed clear and unavoidable. Alex looked Thorne in the eye and simply said, "I'm ready." The first official salvo was a formal demand letter, meticulously drafted by Thorne's firm, detailing every charge, every discrepancy, every violation of state law and HOA bylaws, and demanding a thorough, independent forensic audit of the HOA's financials, along with the immediate suspension of Karen Holloway from the board pending investigation, all delivered via certified mail to the HOA's registered agent and, pointedly, to Karen's home address. The delivery of that letter, a stark white envelope carrying the weight of Alex's resolve, felt like an irreversible step, a bridge burned, solidifying the transformation of a personal grievance into a public battle. The silence from the HOA in the immediate aftermath was deafening, a taut, uneasy calm that lasted for exactly 72 hours before the storm broke, with a fury Alex had anticipated but was still unprepared for. Karen's reaction was explosive, a venomous counterattack designed to annihilate, not merely defeat. A flurry of letters, far more aggressive than anything Alex had received before, began arriving. Not just personal ones to Alex, but accusatory. Mass emails sent to the entire community, painting Alex as a disgruntled, litigious neighbor, fueled by personal vendettas and baseless accusations, disrupting the peace and wasting community funds. The HOA's own hastily assembled legal team, a formidable firm known for its aggressive defense tactics, sent a chilling cease and desist letter of their own, threatening defamation suits and demanding Alex retract all claims, implying dire consequences if they persisted. The immediate effect on the neighborhood was palpable, a chilling division that sliced through the once cordial air. The veneer of suburban harmony cracked, revealing stark fault lines. Neighbors who once offered polite waves or brief chats over fences now seemed to avert their gaze when Alex was outside, or offered strained, fleeting smiles that conveyed more discomfort than greeting. Karen, with a chilling efficiency, began to actively campaign against Alex. She called impromptu community informational meetings, thinly veiled smear campaigns where she spun a narrative of Alex as a destructive force, a selfish individual, trying to dismantle the very fabric of their carefully built community, emphasizing the potential for massive legal fees that would inevitably fall on the homeowners if Alex continued their frivolous lawsuit. She had her loyalists, a small but vocal minority who echoed her sentiments, repeating the rumors she spread, subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, ostracizing Alex in public and even increasing surveillance on Alex's property, their eyes lingering, suspiciously, on the rain barrel, which now stood not just as a defiant statement, but as a lightning rod for the community's nascent tensions. Yet, amidst this chilling isolation, rays of quiet support began to emerge, tentative at first, then slowly growing in strength. Mrs. Henderson, her eyes filled with a newfound fragile courage, brought over a plate of homemade cookies, whispering words of encouragement and sharing her own long-held grievances about Karen's past bullying, even offering to testify if needed. Michael, emboldened by Alex's visible fight, started openly discussing the HOA's dubious contracts with other residents at the community park, even sharing some of his own anecdotal evidence of Karen's questionable dealings. An elderly couple, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, who had lived in the neighborhood for decades, discreetly slipped Alex an old, faded binder containing minutes from a community meeting almost 15 years ago, showing how Karen had systematically marginalized older board members who had questioned her authority, providing a historical context to her current behavior. These small acts of defiance, these whispered confessions of past injustices, were a powerful counterweight to Karen's aggression, reinforcing Alex's conviction that they were indeed fighting for a greater good, not just a rain barrel. The community wasn't just divided. It was slowly, painstakingly, being forced to choose sides, to confront the uncomfortable truth hidden beneath their perfectly manicured lawns. The personal toll on Alex was immense, a relentless siege on their peace of mind. Sleep became a luxury, often stolen in short, restless bursts, punctuated by the relentless churn of legal strategies and the gnawing anxiety of the mounting legal bills, which Thorne's firm, though empathetic, still had to charge. Every mundane task felt fraught with tension. Checking the mail was a gamble, each envelope potentially holding another threat or a new, baseless fine from the HOA. The once peaceful suburban oasis felt less like a home and more like a battlefield, with unseen eyes watching from behind parted curtains and whispered accusations carried on the breeze. The joy Alex once found in tending their garden had been replaced by a grim determination to maintain appearances, to show no weakness, to prove that Karen's tactics wouldn't break them. The rain barrel, battered by the elements and now besieged by human malice, stood as a defiant, almost sentient symbol of Alex's unwavering stance, a constant reminder of the absurdity that had sparked this monumental conflict. There was no turning back, no path to surrender. The stakes were too high, the injustice too profound, and the whispers of support from the fragmented community too compelling. Alex knew that every act of intimidation from Karen, every skeptical glance from a neighbor, only served to sharpen their resolve. They had unearthed the truth, and now, no matter the cost, they were ready to unleash it, to shatter the carefully constructed facade of order and expose the corruption at the heart of their community. A solitary figure standing, firm against a seemingly insurmountable tide, armed with facts and a burgeoning righteous fury. The legal gauntlet had been thrown, and Alex, though weary, was ready to pick it up. The air in the sterile conference room, a neutral ground chosen for the decisive hearing, crackled with an almost tangible tension, a collective breath held. In the community that had fractured under Karen's iron grip, now poised on the precipice of either final subjugation or glorious liberation. Alex, seated beside Elias Thorne, felt a tremor in their hands, a nervous energy that belied the steely resolve forged over months of painstaking investigation. Yet, as they glanced across the room at Karen Holloway, whose face was a mask of cold confidence, flanked by her own slick legal team, a surge of defiant calm washed over them. The truth, Alex knew, was a far more formidable weapon than any bluster or legal maneuver. Thorne began, his voice clear and resonant, laying out the accusations with surgical precision, detailing the HOA's alleged financial impropriety, the pervasive conflicts of interest, and the systemic abuse of power, each point meticulously, supported by the overwhelming volume of evidence that Alex had so painstakingly compiled. The legal team representing the HOA, funded by the very homeowners they had allegedly defrauded, attempted to paint Alex as a disgruntled and obsessive individual, their claims dismissed as personal vendettas, fueled by a minor landscaping dispute, an attempt to reduce the monumental accusations to a trivial squabble over a rain barrel. But Thorne swiftly countered, his cross-examinations dissecting their flimsy narrative with the precision of a surgeon, tearing down each deflection and misdirection, systematically exposing the hollowness of their defense. Then came Alex's turn to speak, not just as a complainant, but as a witness to the unfolding corruption. Guided by Thorne's incisive questions, Alex presented the core of their findings, walking through the meticulously prepared binders, the shocking spreadsheets detailing the inflated contracts awarded to Green Thumb Landscaping, LLC, cross-referenced, with public records clearly showing Ronald Holloway, Karen's first cousin, as its sole proprietor. The undeniable discrepancies in the HOA's financial statements, where miscellaneous repairs mysteriously aligned with Karen's luxury vacation dates, and how board discretionary funds often vanished without a trace, leaving common areas neglected and residents with unexplained fee hikes. Alex produced dated photographs of crumbling park benches and an unrepaired clubhouse roof, stark visual contradictions to the large sums allegedly paid for their maintenance. Each piece of evidence was presented calmly, factually, leaving no room for doubt or denial, a quiet avalanche of truth burying Karen's carefully constructed facade. Karen's lawyer, initially aggressive, grew increasingly flustered, his objections becoming weaker, his attempts to discredit Alex more desperate, his face mirroring the growing discomfort rippling through the small group of HOA members and community residents who had gathered to witness the proceedings. The most damning moments came when key witnesses, emboldened by Alex's courage, stepped forward to testify. Mrs. Henderson, frail but resolute, tearfully recounted how Karen had pressured her into removing a beloved bird feeder, threatening fines that a senior citizen couldn't afford, a small personal injustice that suddenly took on larger meaning in the context of systemic bullying. Michael, the young father, detailed how his chalk drawing incident, dismissed by Karen as graffiti, had been handled with disproportionate severity compared to glaring violations committed by other favored residents. The Petersons, the elderly couple, provided the faded binder of old meeting minutes, showing Karen's long history of systematically sidelining or silencing any board member who dared to question her authority or demand transparency. Painting a chilling historical precedent for her current actions. With each testimony, a collective gasp or a hushed murmur swept through the room, as the community members, once silent or fearful, began to truly grasp the extent of the betrayal they had endured. Karen, initially defiant, her posture rigid and her eyes blazing, began to visibly crumble under the weight of the undeniable evidence and the raw, unfiltered accounts of her long-term tyranny. Her face, once a picture of controlled arrogance, contorted first into disbelief, then thinly veiled rage, and finally a desperate, almost pathetic bewilderment as her carefully constructed world of unquestioned authority shattered around her. Her lawyer, seeing the inevitable, seemed to visibly deflate, his arguments becoming hollow echoes in the face of the overwhelming truth. The final blow came when Thorne presented a sworn affidavit from a former HOA administrative assistant, who, guilt-ridden after years of silence, detailed specific instructions from Karen to manipulate invoices, forge signatures on minor contracts, and deliberately withhold critical financial information from general homeowners. The assistant's statement confirmed beyond any doubt that the financial discrepancies were not errors, but deliberate acts of fraud and mismanagement. At this revelation, a collective gasp swept through the room, and Karen, unable to maintain her composure, let out a choked cry, her perfectly coiffed hair now slightly askew, her meticulously applied composure finally cracking. Her lawyer quickly called for a recess, but the damage was irreversible. The truth, painstakingly unearthed by Alex, had finally seen the light of day. When the hearing reconvened, the air was thick with the anticipation of a verdict. The judge, his expression unreadable, delivered his pronouncement with a solemn clarity that echoed in the stunned silence of the room. He cited the irrefutable evidence of financial malfeasance, conflicts of interest, and the egregious abuse of power, confirming that the HOA had fundamentally failed its fiduciary duties to the homeowners. With a decisive gavel strike that reverberated through the very bones of the room, he declared the Homeowners Association of Willow Creek legally decertified, effective immediately, with a full forensic audit to be initiated, and the distinct possibility of further legal action against the responsible parties. A collective, audible sigh of relief swept through the community members present, followed by a surge of hushed, joyous murmurs that quickly swelled into a wave of quiet, heartfelt "Congratulations." Karen, pale and trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fury, looked as though her entire world had just collapsed. As the room began to stir with jubilant whispers, she was quietly, almost invisibly, escorted out by her shell-shocked lawyer, her reign of terror brought to a humiliating, ignominious end. There was no grand speech from Alex, no triumphant fanfare, just a quiet, profound sense of exhaustion mixed with overwhelming relief and a deep, fulfilling satisfaction. In the immediate aftermath, the transformation in the neighborhood was palpable, as if a great oppressive weight had been lifted. The air seemed lighter, the smiles more genuine, and the previously strained conversations flowed with a newfound ease. Neighbors, who had once averted their eyes, now approached Alex with heartfelt apologies for their past silence, sharing stories of their own small acts of defiance or long-suppressed frustrations, offering genuine gratitude for the courage that had liberated them all. There were offers of help to organize a new, truly democratic community committee, discussions about transparent financial oversight, and even proposals for community-led projects that reflected collective desires, not the whims of a single individual. The community, once fractured by fear and suspicion, was now united in its newfound freedom, bustling with a vibrant democratic energy that had been dormant for years. Alex, though not seeking a leadership role, became a quiet hero, a symbol of resilience and the power of one person's unwavering commitment to justice. Life slowly returned to a new kind of normal, a normal filled with genuine neighborly interactions, and a palpable sense of peace. The oppressive surveillance vanished, the arbitrary fines ceased, and the constant hum of anxiety that had pervaded Alex's life began to recede, replaced by a quiet contentment. And there, beside the garage, untouched and now undeniably beautiful in its simplicity, stood the rain barrel. It was no longer a symbol of defiance or a point of contention. It was a quiet monument to a battle won, a testament to the enduring power of standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. The water it collected now flowed freely, unburdened by the petty tyrannies of the past, nourishing not just Alex's garden, but also the newly blooming spirit of a liberated community, proving that even the smallest, most unassuming object can ignite the greatest of changes, leading to new beginnings for all.